Why so serious? Why shrimp?
Basically, shrimps are not what you think. I absolutely hate 80s notes. GPU got burned, melted. It definitely hit the nerve.
He went to Pixar, I think it was.
This is CG Talks, the podcast where CG guys talk about CG.
This podcast is powered by GarageFarm.net, a place where 3D cloud rendering is incredibly fast and cheap.
Hello, CG Nuts. Welcome to CG Talks, the podcast where CG people talk about computer graphics and coffee. Today it's a special episode because it's completely different, because we have two guests instead of one. And today we have also a very specific guest because they are shrimps. And shrimps are maybe not the most creative creatures, but these specific shrimps are very creative. And today I have with me Mr. Gleb Alexandrov and Aidy Burrows from CreativeShrimp.com. And I'm passing the mic to them to introduce themselves.
Yeah, hi. My name is Gleb Alexandrov. I'm from CreativeShrimp. Basically, shrimps are not what you think they are, because mantis shrimp is an animal with one of the most advanced visual systems on Earth. We won't go into detail, but just believe me, it is super advanced animal in that sense. So yeah, we do computer graphics. We run the CreativeShrimp blog with tutorials, and you have probably heard about it if you are in the Blender community. And we are just, I think, trying to make Blender and make computer graphics accessible to anyone. And that is ironic because our tutorials are not always super accessible. We always try to make it like clear and understandable, but we often just end up making intermediate content. That is what it is.
Hey, it's excuse me. I'm Aidy Burrows. I'm working with Gleb in CreativeShrimp, and I'm the one that usually pops in and then questions everything that Gleb says, just to make sure it like somehow fits into. So, for example, when Gleb just spoke about maybe our stuff sometimes comes across as a bit intermediate, I kind of see myself as being the role where I'll try and kind of play that. I'm a very, very good village idiot. So if I can kind of absorb that information and kind of understand it and then chew it back out right at Gleb, and Gleb understands it.
I absolutely hate 80s notes because when we finish like creating a course or something, Aidy always compiles these lists, and I just have to go through these lists and make tweaks, especially considering like pronunciation issues, because as you can tell, English is not my first language, and we always like go through this kind of process. But on the other hand, hopefully it makes everything better and more understandable for everyone. So that is good ultimately, I think.
Super excited to have you on the show, and I guess we'll be touching on some of the things that you mentioned regarding your cooperation and doing the courses. But let me kick off the whole podcast part with the first question: why shrimp?
Why shrimp? That's a good one. That's a good question, because initially I think the first name of our tutorial channel and stuff like that was something like Blender Game. Then we discovered that there are like really a lot of things called Blender. I won't name it, but yeah, Blender this, Blender that. And the next thing we did is basically
something Blender, something,
exactly
Blender in the name somewhere.
Something Blender, and we tried to just I think go a slightly different path with naming, and then I just searched for the domains that were free and unoccupied, and definitely there were no shrimps in the Blender community, so we went with CreativeShrimp to have at least something related to computer graphics and to visual stuff and to creativity. We left creative in it, and the second part was just for giggles. I think it sounded like it could be a rock band name or something, Creative Shrimps. So it was just fun, I guess.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like an indie band from the 90s or so. Myself, when I was guessing, like trying to guess the story behind that, I had the connotation with the Forrest Gump movie where they bought the shrimp boat
Yeah, that is
for
that is
making
good.
business.
We should use it. Next time someone asks us about it, we should definitely go.
That
into
will
this.
be the
Yeah,
new.
or you could make up a story about it, like every time something different. I think
Yeah,
brand
exactly.
new
ways.
origin story.
Then we discovered the backstory behind mantis shrimps and their visual system. So we can probably remember Joker from the movie, and he told
Had a
like
different backstory.
a different
Yeah.
backstory.
Yeah.
Why? Yeah. Why so serious? Why shrimp?
Why
Okay,
shrimp?
so let's go for the next one. Then why Blender?
Why Blender? That's easy. That's easy. When I was working in a game development studio, and we were using 3ds Max and all the jazz, and like in the background there was this amazing scene of enthusiasts creating computer graphics using open source software, and I was like deeply intrigued by it, and slowly I switched over to Blender, slowly and kind of secretly. The first project I think I used Blender on, it was a competition called something like Her Majesty's Zeppelins. It was about the steampunk environments, and we won this competition using Blender. It was practically the first project involving Blender. And then we posted something online, like a breakdown or making of. And then we made a first tutorial for YouTube. And once it got online and we received like a handful of comments, I realized that I should probably do just that with Blender, uh, because this community and the communal spirit behind it, it was something that moved me, and I just wanted to be helpful. I just wanted to be a part of this. I guess that was my motivation.
Yeah, for me, I remember I studied and learned computer graphics on 3ds Max. The first game industry job that I got was they used Maya. So that was when I found out about Blender eventually, that which uses more of a modifier system like Max, that was like a real very, very useful. So I ended up just using that in the studio at the same time. And that helped. So for example, let's say you've got a metal beam and you're trying to you can use the bevel modifier. You can select which edges you want to bevel, and then you can set exactly the distance that you want that new edge to be created, and it can kind of catch you using that new edge on this metal beam to catch a highlight, to get a glint from the lighting in the scene. But you're not exactly sure where the designer is going to place the camera, so you don't exactly know how big that bevel needs to be. So with Maya, that's a lot more of a destructive process, whereas with Blender and Max, you can set that in the modifier. So if it doesn't quite work out, you can just choose to indicate a little bit of a different, maybe make it slightly larger or slightly less, rebake it out, take a look in the game engine again, and to see how the work is now portrayed, whether you've got the right, that you're pleased with the way that light hits, and take it from there. Those kinds of things, having to be as non-destructive as possible with Blender and its modifier stack, that was just a no-brainer. And it ended up being something which a lot of artists ended up sort of taking a look at and kind of going, oh, actually, this we can use this in a number of ways. But there just wasn't a lot of tutorial content at that time. This is around about 2.49, 2.5 had just come out. In fact, I think it was about then, and there still wasn't that much educational material out there. So you kind of had to figure it
True.
out, which is kind of a privileged position to be in a game studio, and to be able to spend, okay, I can spend the next few hours now just figuring this out. Obviously, if you don't get it done, you're on somebody else's dime there. So you can't. I would spend time at home and just figure things out until the job get done anyway. But still, that was very attractive. And the thing is when you're first starting out and all you know about is 3ds Max, all you know is Maya, the cost of those applications is massive. When you're a student, it's okay, but that's a ticking time bomb. That it's like, you're not going to be a student for long. You're going to need to be paying full price for this very soon. Now, almost everyone's got that person, it might even be you, who has all the pirate software and has access to be able to get hold of all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it is me. And it's funny because you said the privileged position, and I think I was in a privileged position because by the time I started using Blender, there was already the community of tutorial makers, especially on YouTube. And funny enough, I was watching your tutorials basically when I was learning Blender. It was so easy to just make this switch because it literally took me a month to get acquainted due to the sheer volume of educational content available on YouTube for free. And I think
so. Which version did you start with?
I started. I'm not as old. I started using Blender when it was already 2.5. It was the early days of 2.5. And I just jumped in when the interface changed, because that was like the moment when I realized that, now is the time. Now it has normal, let's say, interface.
Yeah. I was the guy that started using Blender just before that, so with 2.49.
It was quite a huge change. It was quite a big jump in usability. And I think it attracted many new users and just reinvigorated the Blender movement and the open source computer graphics movement. And it was the time I just jumped into that boat.
In case anyone's not particularly aware, to give a little bit of a snapshot, the Blender at that point didn't have n-gons. So
really,
you wouldn't have been the new 2.5 when that just started. I remember thinking, right, okay, like why is my cylinder caps all got like triangulated and that kind of thing? So, but there was like a separate build, I think, that you might have been able to get. So that was eye-opening, because then you start to realize, there's all these separate branches and it's moving forward all the time. It's like a new version practically every day.
And where did cycles get introduced?
That was 2.6, I think.
Yeah, later.
So it wasn't 2.5, right?
No.
Or it was like early version of cycles in 2.5, something like that. Because I remember like using cycles right away when I started. I didn't use Blender internal, so it must have been cycles, I think.
When I first started, everyone was talking about things like Lux, Lux Render, I think it was. Things like Octane, I think, stuff like other rendering engines that were integrated into Blender via add-ons. That was that was the start of all that. But I was mostly using it in the game engine kind of idea, really, to be honest. I was very, very fixated on games still at that point.
Yeah, I was largely focused on photorealistic rendering and stuff like that. Before that, I was using V-Ray, Mental Ray, all that stuff. And then GPU rendering in cycles just got me hooked. It was so much more pleasurable, I think, to work with, having this real-time feedback. I didn't have a strong enough computer. I think it was some kind of a laptop, and funny, I just burned this laptop after a month of using it, because I was rendering like 12 hours a day or something like that, and I rendered overnight sometimes, and it got burned. Its GPU got burned, melted. So I think it was the render with the brushes or something like that. You have probably seen it on my station, and it took like 60 hours to fully render. After that, the GPU got melted. So that was cycles.
Yeah, how do you melt stuff in Blender?
Exactly.
A tutorial, please.
Yeah.
So you just render the hell out of your GPU.
Our most popular tutorial, I think, is about destroying stuff in Blender. It has a few million views, and it shows that it's a really hot subject.
Exactly.
Yeah, ironically, not a still image. Like you probably most well known for a lot of your still, your still images, and yet that one is just all simulation.
That's funny. People still watch it, and we still don't have a proper distraction system. So it's definitely a space in which anyone can enter now with some add-on or I don't know, and just make it a huge success, I think.
But I've seen some early birds of introducing physics to geometry nodes. So
Oh, really?
Exciting times ahead for this kind of content, probably. We just have
definitely.
to wait a little bit. Let me just switch a little bit to what you mentioned at the beginning when you talked about your collaboration, you Gleb with Aidy, and you mentioned that you started learning Blender watching Aidy's tutorials, and we can all tell by the results that you as a duet are doing really great. And I think that tandem teams are quite a well-tested way of creative collaboration. When I'm thinking about, Lennon, McCartney, the Coen brothers, Pinky and the Brain, you name it. What's your secret formula for effective collaboration?
Yeah, it's always tricky, I think the first project that we did together, it was Space VFX, if I'm correct.
Yeah,
it was 80s render.
I can't quite recall, but I think around the same time, or maybe slightly before, with the realistic lighting course, I think I might have done a review. Just feedback for
really
things like that.
50-50. The project that we worked on together was Space VFX, and after that hard surface modeling, that was also the thing, and it just proved to be successful. I guess it just proved to be a good process, if not for that final fixes stuff.
Despite the hard comment list.
Despite Aidy policing my language all the time.
Constant learning for you as well. So maybe can you tell me how you manage living in separate countries, because you Gleb are now living in Poland, right? Aidy's in UK.
Yeah, exactly.
So how do you, is that a challenge for you, or is it super casual and it's no problem?
Yeah, I don't think it is a challenge. It is an opportunity rather, because when we just started working together, I was living in Belarus, and in Belarus there is no such thing as PayPal for receiving money, and just it is a rather complicated process to set up a business. Even a business abroad, because all the regulations, and we had to work around some of them. And it was just good to be able to do something which is A, international, B, that supports financial tools that we needed, and it was a part of what made it possible, I think. But aside from that, I don't think it was a problem. It was a very natural, very easygoing process.
And you started that before the pandemic, where everyone
way before
corporations.
Way before that. I think it was 7 years before the pandemic. Our first course, Realistic Lighting, was released 7 years ago, even 8 years ago, something like that. So it was.
Yeah, I remember I think we were aware of each other anyway online, but we met at the Blender conference, 2014, 2015, something like that. And that was we had a discussion on one of the dinners. Over one of the dinners there, they had these really long tables, and loads of people, loads of Blender heads were sat at that, and I was nearby to Gleb at that time, and it was
a beer or two must have been involved.
Yeah, and it was like, okay, so why are you not releasing any courses and things like that? And then he explained like the financial limitations that a lot of Belarusians were under and probably still are, especially at the moment. And it was like, right, okay, well, if there's anything we can do in collaboration or anything we can do, essentially, I'll sort the admin out, you just create, and we'll essentially just funnel that through to you as being like a client, like hired to create this stuff kind of thing. And it's just like try and pass all the money through, basically.
Yeah, it worked for us. Then I opened a business in Belarus. Then I closed the business in Belarus and moved to Poland. Now we live in Poland, in Warsaw. And we just keep working using this business that we created at that time in the UK. So we started an LTD company to just use it for all of the financial stuff.
Yeah, and it's an online business, so kind of seems natural for people to
we work with people from
online.
all around the world, from Canada, from the United States, you name it.
I was going to say it's not that difficult because we're obviously basically within Europe, and so the hour isn't really that different. Like the time difference between us right now is only an hour.
Negligible. It's an hour or two.
Yeah, 1 hour.
Yeah. Other people that we've worked with, like Chanel, for example, or Rachel, who are in more American side, wasn't really that much of a difference either, because by about mid-afternoon, they're basically coming online as well, and then you've got the rest of the afternoon and the evening to just bat back. And a lot of the process is seeing what somebody has created.
Exactly, and just providing feedback.
Yeah.
And it's not that kind of feedback like where you need to jump on Skype and talk. Not even that, just simple comments on Discord or something.
I kind of realize that might not work for everybody, though, because the written language is completely devoid, obviously, of body language and tone of voice. Hence why I try and use as many emojis as possible. Because it's something can be said in jest, but it comes across as hurtful, and it just this is the limitation really of just something being written. The tone, like I say, tone of voice, body language is a really, really big deal. So some people, I think, if there's tension there, the written word can sometimes be interpreted as always kind of assumed first in the mind. It can be a mindset thing, I think, is that it can be your current mindset colors what they have said. So if you're defensive about something and somebody has written something like, why did it take you this long to do this? You kind of think, they're accusing me of something. Whereas the reality is it's actually framed more like, wow, how long did it take you to create this? This is amazing.
Yeah, exactly. Critique, it can be quite traumatizing and damaging, and especially if you are not sure about the emotion and the intent at that time. If it's a written text, so how do you know?
Yeah,
the more room there is for interpretation, the more artful it becomes, and the more like an art project it becomes. So it just back and forth in a chat can be considered art in a sense, because you're trying to on the one hand you've got complete interpretation, on the other hand you've got the opposite of that, which is, I suppose, law, like legal command of the language, and even that,
or maybe even code.
Yes, very true. And but especially as leaning on the legal analogy for a second, it's clear that even that gets debated and interpreted in many different ways, and sometimes unusual and creative ways as well. So it's very hard not to inject some creativity into almost everything, even the process of just back and forth and communicating as we are now. That's there's when there's room for interpretation, that's just like the individual or the personality comes through, and that's why it's maybe not for everybody. or at least if you've got a negative personality, that might color everything you see, the kind of art you enjoy, the kind of conversations that you have. And with Gleb and our working relationship, I think we tend to kind of just assume the other person's coming from the right place. And so it kind of makes that interaction very easy.
And anyway, we mostly work within the Google Doc or something. So for us, it's just when we start a new project, let's say, the first thing we do, 100% of the cases, we create a Google Doc.
Yeah.
And we outline, we try to structure this project and outline every major thing about it. So just to make sure we are on the same page and we are doing the same project, because it's not as straightforward, especially when it comes to creative things, and we just tend to do creative things. It is very important to establish the right, I guess, understanding of what are you working on, especially if you work with a bigger team. But yeah, I think we have never did bigger projects that involves 3 or 4 people. It was just 2 or 3 most of the time. 3, I mean, for example, when we were working with Manu Järvinen or with Jana Landry, they were creating the content and we were just providing our feedback. So it wasn't like we were involved, like all of us, in creating the stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you seem to have come to a nice kind of working balance in that. So maybe let's talk about the results of it and the latest results that you had of this creative process or a way of collaboration. I mean the latest lighting course that you just released.
Let me just say, it seems to be a huge success. Let's put it straight. I wasn't expected like anything of that sort. It sold more than what is it? 1,300 copies already in just 5 days. Yeah, I couldn't have imagined it. I think it has all chances to become our, I think, most popular course so far, even beating the hard surface modeling, which I thought was improbable or even impossible. So yeah, let me just say that I'm deeply grateful and deeply thankful to the Blender community, which just makes it possible, which still thinks that there is some value in our courses. It is unbelievable for me personally to think that so many people could actually enjoy or find it helpful.
Can we maybe play a little bit guesswork why that success, like with this particular course?
Like someone mentioned on Twitter that it definitely hit the nerve. It hit the nerve. It is applicable to so many different projects. Lighting is quite fundamental. Without light, there is no vision, surprise. And so many different, let's say, sides of computer graphics industry involve lighting to some extent. Even if you're, say, a 3D modeler, you still light your models and you still have to present them. If you do product visualizations, if you do VFX, if you do, God forbid, photogrammetry, anything you do involves lighting, especially if you're into visualization and rendering. Then probably 90% of the time you're trying to make it look beautiful, make it look appealing, make it look evocative, cinematic, all these adjectives. And it boils down to lighting. It boils down to fundamental characteristics of light, just how appealing it looks in the end, the aesthetics, or how does it play to your narrative, this function, or how does it make your objects look round and 3-dimensional. That's also like quite fundamental characteristic of lighting, or what mood it creates, like what setting, what mood, what atmosphere, how it helps to describe the location. So all these functions are the functions of lighting more than anything. And you just have to know that. You just have to realize how to tweak those things to achieve the result you want to achieve.
Yeah, I'm thinking that what you mentioned, lighting is like a crucial skill for any 3D artist, and it's often like the case where, and it's like pretty popular topic in YouTube tutorials, talking about making things photorealistic. Like this, like a keyword that was hyped for a
and
long time.
photography is literally drawing with light.
Yeah, but
Photography.
photorealistic is like the realistic part is not really what most people are about. When making 3D art, it's like rather the other word that you used, cinematic, is like a more. It's more what it's all about, because it's not just about things looking realistic, like
It's just this,
but beautiful, as you mentioned, or appealing.
heightened realism.
Yeah.
A special kind of realism.
Sometimes you want mundane
aesthetically
look.
pleasing.
That's also.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think as you said with the word cinematic, there's a certain emotion that's wrapped up in that as well. Like there's an atmosphere is already within that term, which isn't present in a term like photorealistic, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And I think that your trailer that you prepared for the course, it sells the idea pretty well. Like the objects that are shown are not specifically mind blowing. You might say it's like
very simple indeed. Very simple indeed.
objects, but they are
lighting can make even the simplest of objects, like the famous spheres that everybody uses. When you have to showcase your lighting setup or something like that, you use a sphere, and even a sphere can look gorgeous depending on what you do with lighting. You can like move the lights in such way to show the silhouettes. I don't know. You can make it look flat. You can make it look three-dimensional. Anything in between. You can throw some shadow pattern and make it look like it's a nighttime scene. Or you can do so many things just with lighting. That's the most, I guess, appealing thing about it, about learning how to set a proper lighting.
So if you would describe, like, to our audience right now who is interested in the course and maybe wondering whether to buy it or not, who is this course for? You mentioned that you're aiming to
audience.
Be accessible, but sometimes you tend to make intermediate content. Like, who is it for, and what are the benefits a 3D artist will get from the course?
I think it is, simply speaking, it's for those 3D artists who want to level up their lighting skills, to put that broadly. I think that is fair enough to say that. And especially for the people who are interested at the same time in making it look cinematic, in making it look like it's coming from that aesthetic side of the spectrum.
And it's about lighting,
which is still linked to the narrative.
Yeah, exactly. And is it using the real-time engine, Eevee, or
we are using both? We're using both. We use, I think, mostly cycles because it is closer to the way the light works in reality, and it is closer to the way the light works when you set up lighting on stage or on a movie set. I think we use a lot of things that actually are inspired by real cinematography, like the light modifiers, that kind of stuff. That we try to be inspired by the process of photographers, by the process of cinematographers, and to take some of these principles, techniques, and intuitions into the realm of 3D. I think that was my main motivation. I'm very interested not only in computer graphics, but also in photography. I've become really interested in it over time. How the lenses work, how the light gets like transported to the sensor, and then how you post-process it to deliver the final image, and how you modify the light on location and on stage, and how to work with the light available on location. It's a totally different process when you compare it from working from scratch in 3D, where you can just clear things up and set up a blank slate, a clean slate, and just work step by step. And if you go to the other end of the spectrum, where you have some light available on location, and then you trim down some part of that light and work within the limitations, that's another mindset, which is very interesting to take to 3D, to Blender. Just try to work like that. And actually, speaking about that, we present two of these, let's say, mindsets in our course: how to work from scratch and set the light layers one by one, and how to start with basically with the available light. We simulate it with the help of the HDRI lighting, and then we just take it from there.
I think it's an interesting topic, really, because the most used or most understood that I think most people would research, they kind of come very, very quickly against 3-point lighting. It's almost like to light something, you just need 3-point lighting and that's it. And it's kind of like fascinating to see, people who are known as being amazing lighting artists, people like Roger Deakins working on film sets, and to see,
exactly.
I think
it was
they
so
went
funny when you showed me this link.
Yes, yeah. He went to Pixar, I think it was, during the Wall-E stage, and to try and educate some of the staff there as to 3-point lighting, and he realized he really, really struggled because I don't think he'd ever done it. So
yeah, I don't think he has a concept of 3-point lighting at all.
Yeah.
His process is completely different. He starts from a completely different perspective on lighting.
Exactly. Yeah.
And 3-point lighting is overrated. Anyway, I find it like not super helpful to start with 3-point lighting like right away as your basic setup. Your final setup will often involve some approximation of 3-point lighting. You will eventually arrive like at that point. But to start from 3 lights is not super helpful because I find it super useful to have a concept of the key light or the dominant light or the main light, just one general direction, one main light source, and start from that point. It's much more productive, I think, because a very common mistake in all kinds of renders, photos, and you name it, is just having too many light sources and just a few conflicting ideas of light, like struggling. The way to clear this mess is to establish the key light. It is a very simple principle, yet super effective one.
Yeah, the what's working against most artists is probably they've built something and they want to show it. So you also want to present a mood, but at the same time you're kind of going, I really want to show off this bit I modeled, though.
Yes,
So
exactly. This happens in movies as well. The conflict between, let's say, the aesthetic function and the function of what is useful to the narrative at that moment. Because aesthetic function just tells you show the 3 dimensions, in the most pleasing way. Like put this giant soft light source to show a beautiful light fall off on the face. And then maybe the narrative calls for a completely different thing, as you have said, for something mundane, like to make it look as boring as possible. Maybe that's what you need. And these conflicting motivations prevent you from realizing that. It is very interesting subject to talk about, like how the light functions, what to prioritize at that moment. And I think a lot of I think many 3D artists tend to prioritize naturally the aesthetic function, like to make it look glamorous, like you said, Aidy, basically to to establish like a strong read on the main shapes to present it like in a more three-dimensional way with the most depth and stuff like that. So that is interesting indeed.
Yeah, that's what you said. Like seems to me like the biggest challenge for any 3D artist is really being aware what you're doing and like deciding on, like being decisive in your actions and being conscious, because and that's kind of hopeful maybe for the whole AI thing that's coming. And at the end you have to kind of choose what's the result that you really want. And there, in that sense, there will never be the make perfect render button, because there are just so many variables, and the perfect render might not mean the same.
Yeah. The
for
perfect
each case.
render must be really intentional. It's all about the communicating the intent. Like, it is really precise.
Okay,
at least it should be.
So maybe let's talk about. You already kind of have a quite big portfolio of courses, and the latest course is also impressive. But what is the course that you dream of making and yet have not decided to do?
Oh God, that's a really good question. I think we have brainstormed a couple of ideas, but we want to do so many different things. We want to make games, we want to release a rock album. How about that? Yeah, even outside of the courses stage, like we would like to experiment with many different things. Really, maybe make a CG movie at some point. That would be interesting. I think that's something that we can technically do. I'm not very good at writing, I think. But aside from that, we have everything we need, I think, to make it work.
Oh, that sounds exciting. And I'm thinking that right now we're over 40 minutes. So these topics we'll be catching up on them in the next parts of the podcast. And to sum up maybe this round, I'll also ask you, because I've seen online on the social media that some people are already sharing results from the lighting course from CreativeShrimp, and
yeah, especially on our Discord.
So I wanted to ask about places online where people can find
other
people's work and inspirations, and maybe a hashtag.
People can find us on Twitter, either on my Twitter or Aidy's Twitter. We have a Discord community. And that is the place to share your work in progress and just ask questions. We have a students chat for the lighting course students there, as well as the dedicated support channel. And we are monitoring these channels. So if you have any questions, or if you run into any roadblock, or if you get stuck, we will definitely help you to get unstuck. And it is such a great thing, the community, because sometimes we receive questions that we are not immediately aware of how to respond to them, how to fix this issue, and sometimes the community like fixes it itself. People communicate.
Yeah, there was a recent example was the Mac operating system, which we don't use. But somebody was having a crash issue, for example, and then it turned out that somebody else related that and said, oh yeah, I was having a very, very similar issue. It turned out to be an add-on, try this. And so they were amongst themselves. That was extremely heartening to see, just people. Yeah, I mean, that's what the Blender community is like anyway, really, though.
Yeah, that was cool.
That's a note I really want to end this part on, like the community, because this will be a link to the next part where we will be talking about Blender future and the community and all stuff related. So thanks again for doing this part. We'll do a short break and we'll be back to the CG Talks once again with Aidy and Gleb.
At garagefarm.net, you'll find many 3D rendering solutions. Use coupon codes visible on our social media channels during registration to boost your account up to $100 of free render credits, and check how quick and life-saving 3D cloud rendering is.